poor survive when it's so hard to make ends meet?
Well, you could stop taking 20% of their income through taxation.
Besides that,
That's a good question. And I'm with Pastor Tom, and we wanted to talk about the decline of. Well, introduce yourself, Pastor Tom.
Oh, well, hello, everybody. Hope that you've had a great Lord's Day today. I know that I have. And I'm a pastor of a church there. It's called Trinity. And so I have a show called Captive Thoughts that I do on YouTube where I talk about basically it tries to be encouraging for believers. But hopefully, if there's anyone who's not a believer, you can still listen and hopefully you'll take some encouragement with that. So point of my channel is to hopefully provide sanity in the midst of the collapse.
Right on. I dig it. And today you wanted to come on to talk about the decline of Christianity in the West. Is that correct?
Yeah, because when y'all did that a couple of weeks ago, y'all talked a lot more about a lot of the external circumstances that kind of had been leading to the decline, which I thought was very interesting. But within any organization or community or anything like that, whenever they go into decline, there are external reasons, but then there's also internal reasons. And so I thought I wanted, at least from someone who's sort of come out of the evangelical culture and whatnot, I could probably offer what I've seen as many of the internal reasons for why Christianity is declining.
Okay, so like, what would the main reason be if someone were to ask you?
In a nutshell, it would be that churches, from pastors to laymen, stopped believing that the gospel of Jesus Christ was enough to build the church, enough to sustain and satisfy one in their life, just enough. And from top to bottom, I mean, that would be it in a nutshell. And that could be applied in a number of different areas.
Interesting. So you say it's enough, or is it not enough, or
it's not enough? They would say that the gospel is not enough.
They will say the gospel is not enough. Okay, I would agree, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So,
because when I think it's not enough, it's one thing to preach the gospel. It's another thing to cultivate it and make sure that you're actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk. You don't want to just know the truth, pass it on, and move on. That's not,
Well, no, that's not necessarily what I mean. What I'm talking about here is, with the older generation, the boomer generation, a lot of the pastors there were like, well, we really want to grow our churches, right? Now, there's been the tried and true method of growing the church, right? That is the institution of the ordinances or the sacraments. That has been the preaching of the gospel and of Christian teaching and, discipling of the saints, and then evangelism and serving the community, right? And that has been the tried and true methods for building a church. And basically, ultimately, in doing those things, trusting that God will build his church. That has been what has been successful in the past. That is what has been, through the 2,000 years of the church's history. Well, basically with the boomers, they believed that, well, no, we don't need to do that anymore. There's a number of reasons that basically went into that, but essentially they bought into pragmatism. And so they said, well, now what we need to do is, what do people want, right? Well, they're all about self-help right now. So we need to, rather than having Christian teaching, it needs to be all about how can you improve yourself? How can you get more money? How can you be a better father? How can you be a better mother? All this kind of stuff, right? Which Christian teaching does do, but it wasn't that we want to teach them how to be Christians. It's we want to teach them how to be better people. It's self-improvement, because the gospel, that's not enough. It's not enough to just tell somebody that Jesus died for them or anything like that. There's got to be all this self-improvement. And so that's happened for a long time, and it really didn't work very well. So you had a whole lot of other people come in, and you kind of said, okay, well, the gospel is not enough. So we've got to throw out 2,000 years worth of tradition, and get rid of pulpits, get rid of pews, get rid of all that music, because it's the music, right? That's the problem. So now we've got to have, and we're gonna frame this as contemporary versus traditional, even though that's never the way that we've looked at music before. But that's how we're going to frame it, because we want to make a clean break from the past, because gospel's not enough for these people now. So we have to throw out everything And then we're going to put in all this music, right? And of course, now with our generation, it's, well, the gospel's not, it's not enough to just be a Christian. Now you've got to go out and you've got to save the world, right? So if you're not trying to save the world, if you're not trying to, help everybody, everything like that, well, then, you're not a good person. You're not going to feel special. You're not special. The idea of believing in Christ, trusting him, and trying to live your life as a good employee, as a good father, a good, son, whoever, right, person, and just, again, believing in Christ and following the teachings of Scripture, that the idea that just being enough isn't enough for people, right? And there's a number of different ways from the layman's perspective, right? The gospel, the fact that Jesus died for that's not exciting enough. I have to go watch more TV, or I have to go, watch another movie, because the idea that, God became flesh. Nah, I mean, come on, that's boring, right? That's, we can't have that. Or, I've got to go to my child's soccer game, right? Or anything like that. So, the idea of just, again, that's basically what I mean here when I'm saying in a nutshell is that the things of God, the good news of Jesus Christ, and along with that, everything that goes with that just stopped being enough for people. They just thought that either they could improve it or I don't know, but they just sort of stopped. And again, from top to bottom, that has been the result. And so as that has been taken very much out of the church in a great number of churches, you've seen people who basically are not being taught the gospel and they're not being given Christian teaching anymore.
Yeah, it's basically, I would say, cosmopolitan Christianity, or to a certain degree. You have to make it so that you have to pack on a simple message. Let's say, for instance, like, we have to basically add on a self-help message, and it has to be universal, so everyone might listen to our message, which is basically the self-help message, and then somehow they just tag on the gospel. Is that basically what that is?
Yeah, I mean, the gospel maybe is just an afterthought, or, it's sort of like, well, believe in Jesus, right? And of course, that's sort of more for the boomers. See, in the millennial generation, now it's all about, rather than self-help, because no one wants to help yourself anymore, because we're all special. We're all great, right? That's what we were told our whole lives, right? How special and wonderful we are. So we don't need any self-help. So now it's all about helping your neighbor, right? So now you've got to go out and you've got to, give to them. So if you're not ready to pack up and go to a mission trip and spend the next 4 years of your life in, South America, helping them and preaching the gospel, then you're not a good Christian. You need to question your entire salvation.
Oh, that's
right?
evil. That's evil.
Right.
That's evil. That's evil right there. That is legitimately, that's evil. That's compulsory. What are you like? It's like compulsory crusaderism almost. Like, oh, we have to go fight the evils of the, down the street. We need volunteers, and then they bring in a few volunteers. Says, okay, now the draft. Like, they're drafting you.
There's been a preacher who has literally said that. He said, you're in the army now. Once you became a member of this church isn't about you anymore. Now you're in the army. Now you've got to do what we say, essentially. I mean, so they've very much talked like that. That
is evil. That is freaking evil. And I'm a Catholic, so there are certain things I have to do, and there are certain things that I've assigned that it was part of the bargain of being a Catholic. You guys are Protestants, and this is like evangelical, right? So it's not just like, it's okay. So there's no one authority, but this is like a common trend then, right? Independently.
Yeah, go ahead.
Independent from, let's say, it's a common mimetic trend within Christian evangelical circles, whether it be, it's not like some grand conspiracy. It's happening it's on the rise, like Pumped Up Kicks or something like that.
Because the main thinking in evangelical circles is if it's producing big numbers of people, well, then that's where God is working. God must be blessing it. And so if somebody has a large number of people, if they have a big church or, a huge whatever, then whatever they say, people are going to take that as authoritative. And because that is the primary thing. And again, there's someone I've met, I know recently, who was in one of these associations, and that is very much how he views it, is that if it's not growing as far as numbers, well, then God's not blessing that. So you have to change what you're doing, and you have to find what God is blessing, and you know that you found it when it's producing large number of people. If you can draw a crowd, well, then that's where God is. That is the numbers is very much, they won't say that it's the sole thing that's driving them, but it is very much the sole thing that is driving them.
Oh, they're sophists then. They don't want to actually preach the gospel of Christ. They just want to win the argument and get your money, or at least get your views, I should say.
Yes, it's become very exploitive of people, and it's either wanting to exploit their time for the sake of ego, or like you said, wanting to exploit money, or in some cases, as I've heard very recently, property.
Well, that's evil. Spiritual clickbait is one thing, but when you try to like extort people, that's evil. That's
Yes.
legitimate evil.
Oh, I've heard from a certain organization that they are telling their pastors to go to their congregation and to say, first off, they're calling these pastors the voice of God to these people, which Luke,
Heresy.
you should probably recognize how evil that is,
Heresy.
right? And you need to go to them. You say, God needs your help, and so this property that you want to give to your children, you need to deed it over to our organization because we want to use it for a church plant. So you don't want to deed it to the actual church plant. No. You deed it to the organization.
Who is this church? Who are these churches? Do you have their names?
It's not a church. It's an organization. It's an association.
Okay. Who is this?
It's the Triangle East Association.
Triangle East Association. Alrighty. Look that up. Look that one up, Luke. Do you have any clips if you can? Did you bring me with you, Mr. Pastor Tom?
Did I bring any clips?
About this?
No.
I mean, it's just your word. I mean, I take you at your word. It sounds evil what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, I mean, again, right from their perspective here, and they would say, well, we want to have property for the church plants. We don't have any money for the church plants, so we your congregations, your people there, they have property, so they could help us out by doing this, right? So that would be how they would want to present it here. However, again, looking at it in the best of the way, this is how it very much sounds. Is it sounds exploitative. And that's in the best light. But again, you could also look at this as there's a lot of issues here with this. Again, I have the biggest issue with the idea of saying to the pastors, well, you're the voice of God. And again, God needs your help. I have a very big problem with those kind of things because you're almost trying to bind the conscience of people, basically saying like, well, if you don't, hand over your property to this organization, then you're somehow trying to hinder the will of God. I mean,
I own your property by divine right, essentially.
Yeah. Right.
That's evil.
And so, the problem, again, there's a number of issues with that. But that's one example of a number of examples of basically how a lot of the leadership within the church has, again, they don't, and this is not everybody, but this is just the general trends, right? Where they're more so trying to exploit their people rather than trying to actually love them, and you can ask this from your pastor, right? How much of your pastor, if they want to see their church grow, why do they want to see their church grow? Do they want to see their church grow because they actually want to invest into every single person who's walking into that door? They actually want to disciple them and counsel them? Or do they want to see their church grow so that way they can see a number on a spreadsheet go up?
That, and also the fact that apparently if the church grows a bit more, you also get a tax rebate. Do you know about that?
No, I didn't know about that.
You could, like in California, if you give to like some of these churches, I'm not going to say names, but they will, if you like, right, there's like a card, like big mega churches or what have you, they have like a card where you say your name and then you just put it in, and it, as you basically give, you don't tithe anonymously. You can, but there's a way for you to tithe in a different way. They'll send you a tax credit for all the money you've donated.
Oh, now that I do know. Yeah, no, I did know about that.
Okay, I mean, I understand.
I thought you were saying the church has got some sort of tax rebate because they grew in size.
No.
Oh,
this is
I knew about that. Yeah, but that's because the church is, a nonprofit.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we give God our 10%, and then we go, and then, well, we get what, like a 10% back, I guess, so like a 1% of 10%. I don't know. I mean,
you mean from the government?
From the government, yeah. So God, yeah, even God pays taxes. I don't know, but it's I don't know. It's just I don't know. That's one instance of it, but yeah, I mean this whole mega. They make it very much about themselves, the pastors, so to speak, because it seems to me like they just want people to just give them money, just give them tons of money, and they want to grow, livestock essentially, like all. I don't want to sound like an edgy fucking gothic teenager or whatever, but it really does seem like something that would appear in a Nine Inch Nails song or something. Like what
Well,
they're
I
doing
mean,
to these
again, and
people.
this is even said in books. I mean, I was reading a book about church growth that said, telling a pastor, right now, pastor literally means shepherd. That is what the word means. It means shepherd. And he says in this book that for a church to grow, the pastor has to stop thinking of himself as a pastor, because what he uses is the word shepherd. He needs to stop thinking of himself as a shepherd and instead think of himself as a rancher.
Oh wow! Oh!
That is literally the words that he uses. Let me see if I can pull it up. Actually, but
Pull
I
that
don't
up.
want to
I
waste time
wanna
doing
see
that. But
this.
I can try to find it. The
It's
quote.
if I can say something, Pastor. It says this problem. What you talking about is something that has been part of the church even when I got converted way back in 2007. In this Q&A, this back and forth with Ravi Zacharias, Moeller, and R.C. Sproul, they were talking about the seeker-sensitive movement, and that's been something that's always been a feature of a long-standing problem of the church. And even R.C. Sproul said that this sort of thing would cost the church immensely. And Mueller, he had this observation when he described it as if the logic is if you scratch people where they now itch, they'll be more inclined to hearing the gospel, which first of all doesn't work. And he had this interesting analogy, and he said, look at all the churches that were built on this methodology, and notice how their back door is always larger than their front door.
Yeah, seriously, like imagine doing lines of cocaine to try to preach the gospel. There's a difference between preaching to people who and confessing that they're sinners and that you're a sinner, they're a sinner. It's another thing entirely. Start bathing with the freaking pigs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here it is. Here it is. So this is the quote. Switch from the shepherd mode of pastoring to the rancher mode. Of all the changes that need to be made in a small church, if it is ever to cross the 200 barrier, two stand head and shoulders above the rest. Transitioning from the single cell to the multi-cell church and switching from the shepherd mode of pastoring to the rancher mode. Not only are these changes necessary, but they are particularly difficult because they are two changes most predictably resisted by the majority of church members.
And this is why the pagans hate us, because this is like legitimately, like they're literally giving people their recipes essentially to how to make mega churches and make mega bucks by extension, or actually not by extension, but like
what the people are to think. Yeah, so this is what he says for the people, right? Make your pastor the tribal chief.
That's well, there's a deepest pits of hell are for traitors and mutineers, so to speak. And this is like some treasonous shit right here. This is like I'm making myself above God. They're evil. That's evil.
Well, I mean, it's pragmatism, and that's and pragmatism is the servant of prosperity, and that's what a lot of these churches are thinking. And again, that's because they've defined prosperity as numbers, right? Or success. God's hand in it is just numbers. And you want to tell them, well, look at Islam. Islam's one of the fastest growing religions. Do you really think God's hand is in that?
No.
So clearly just a numbers game isn't maybe the best way to determine if God's hand is in it or not, right? I mean, again, now, to be fair, and this is, of course, again, right, there's always these half-truths in everything. So, for example, they were all about self-help. Well, does the Christian need to grow? Yes, right. That's sanctification, right? Or right now, do we need to go out, right? Yes, we should love our neighbor. We should care for the betterment of, our fellow man, but that's the half truth in there, right? And then they twist that though, because then they make it all about that. That's how it becomes effective. And that is, again, because the best lie is what? They have some truth mixed into them. They have to have that little bit of truth to make the rest of the BS go down.
Yep. Yeah, it's two truths and a lie. The old children's game. And
I mean, of course, again, from the people's perspective, this is a lot of the leadership here. So there's a lot of issues with the leadership. Of course, from the layman's perspective, right? There's a lot of idolatry, and I think you could tie a lot of this into the lack of church discipline.
Well, the question then becomes with discipline is by whose authority are you going to discipline me? Why don't you just go start your own church?
Well, I mean, you could do that, but at least then, you would know that they're out of the church. A lot of churches in the evangelical circles, they don't even want to do church discipline, again, for the sake of pragmatism. Well, if we do church discipline, then people might not like us. They may leave here. And so they don't ever want to do that. And what you have is when you never engage in discipline, you have a bunch of undisciplined people. And that's what we have. We have a bunch of undisciplined laymen.
from the layman's perspective, the people who are, let's say active in church, but not necessarily in leadership positions, like how would if you were to give this criticism to the pastor, what's to say he would just go start your own church? Seriously, like I had a father, my father, he went down and to the church that we went to when I was a Protestant, actually. And he told him that he was a King James only guy. He was explained it to the pastor at the time why the NIV and a bunch of other versions of the Bible are just garbage. He got into the King James only movement, and basically, he was told to go fuck off. I'm going to continue to teach the way I want to teach, and I'm going to use the NIV. And my father went to a different church. So, like, So I guess the question then becomes, at what point do you just expose these people, and at what point do you win the argument? Because at this point, I think they're using the name of God. As much as I don't like the idea of it, they're using the name of God and the name of prosperity and all that's holy to gain money and to bring fame to themselves. So how do you fight against that? They'll just say besides just saying you're just jealous, go start your own church or something like that. How would you stop that?
The only way I would know as a pastor, the only way I know to stop it is to just preach biblical truth. And, again, in my church and preaching that to the people there, and ultimately trusting in God, that God will still call his sheep. So there are going to be a lot of people. This is what it says in Timothy, right? A time, in the last days, which, not talking exegetically, but I believe we've been in the last days since Christ ascended. So, in the last days, there are going to be those who will seek for themselves teachers who tell them whatever they want to hear. They have itching ears. And so these are the kind of pastors, and they're not really pastors, but these are the kind of speakers that these people have. God, though, will continue to build his church. He will continue to call his sheep, and they will come by him if you will faithfully preach the gospel and teach biblical Christianity. So that's, to me, is the best way to fight it, is to basically keep doing what you're doing and recognize that God already knew that this was going to happen. And there will be a lot of people who will be deceived, and it'll be bad for these people on Judgment Day. And so we can pray for them. We can give them truth and light and pray that they hear it. And and at the end of the day, trust God with the results of that.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. You got to expose some of these people. You have to
Oh, sure. You can tear down the arguments. You can expose why these things are not good.
By all means, that's why I say going on the offensive. You can't just run defensive and try to debunk shit, but you also have to, challenge this guy to a debate, ask him for a debate. I know this guy. I've seen this guy around for a bit.
You can do that, but a lot of these people will never debate you because they recognize they have nothing to gain from debating you. And the little bit of respect that they might lose from people by not debating you is not worth what they would lose in debating you. It's the same reason why the communists don't really want to debate anybody, or the same reason why so many of these, homosexual people who want to push that don't want ever to debate, because they risk more from debate than not debating. So you can try to debate them, but the chances are is they won't ever do it because they know they don't have a leg to stand on. They know they'd lose in the debate most of the time, unless they're just foolish. In which case, yeah, you can take advantage of that. But most of these people, they didn't, who are already have these mega churches, they didn't get to that position by just being, completely foolish.
Well, I would suggest, more aggressive means, not necessarily illegal means, but what was it? I brought up Nick Fuentes previously on this podcast. There was a part where he went after Ben Shapiro, like he was just meeting him. I think it was the RNC, just like, "Hey Ben, I'm looking for you. What you doing? Just do that. Confront these guys. Hidden body cam, confront some of these people and actually ask them like legitimately. Do it. Like that's how I would do it. And freedom of the press, freedom of religion. You're allowed to debate, play by the rules. That's what I would do. Because I'll tell you this: these people are destroying Christianity's good name. They really are. They get the most amount of they're basically getting their fame whores, their attention whores and fame whores, and they're making money off of it. It's evil. They're basically clickbait preachers. So, go after them as hard as you can in the best way you can,
Yep. And along with that, though, I think another way, I would say along with that, and there are people who do that. For example, Chris Roseborough of Pirate Christian Radio, that's what a lot of what he does is. And he's gone to a lot of these churches and had a lot of these conversations. A.D. Robles is another guy that's really started to do this. John Harris is another individual who's been starting to do this. So there are more people who are beginning to do this. From my perspective, at least in terms of my talents, I could do this, and I'm not necessarily opposed to do this, but I also prefer to give people teaching because. From my perspective, the best way to identify counterfeits is by knowing the genuine article so well that it's easier to recognize the counterfeit. So the more, the better teaching that I can give people of Christianity, the more they know about what the Bible actually says, the less they're going to be drawn in by these other, foolish lies. And they'll be able to recognize them because they know what the truth is. So you don't have to know every single lie, but you can know what the truth is. So that's, and again, for me as a role as a pastor, I guess that's, a lot of my interest is on wanting to equip my people, Now, yes, there is a sense of defending them. And so when these teachings do come up, when people bring them to me, I do have to confront them and say, well, no, that's not actually what the Bible says. Like, again, I've had a number of people come and ask me, where's it say in the Bible, God never puts on you more than you can handle? I'm like, well, that's not actually in the Bible.
Well, like Sun Tzu once said, know thy enemy, know thyself. In 100 battles, you'll never be in peril. To know thyself only 50% of times means you're going to win 50% of the time. To know your enemy 50% of the time means you'll lose 50% of the time. You got to know both sides of it, You gotta know both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would very much recommend those, go subscribe to the Christian Pirate Radio. Go subscribe to Pastor Tom. Look into this stuff. Learn as much as you can, and even if you're a Christian, more so go after them. Don't be frightened because they're Christian. Go after them. That's just a label. It wasn't the devil the devil comes in wolves of sheep's clothing. This is an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, again, they are, when they're doing this, they are a type of antichrist, right? Because they're preaching a faux Christianity. And of course, again, now some of these people, though, and this is also where I would say you would need to be careful with some of this, is because some of these are people who actually do want to do good, according to God, but they are also drawn into this teaching, right? And this is the problem because it's coming from the top and then it is trickling down. So you have, and that's where you'd have, again, if you're in a church and you hear this, it'd be good to have a talk with your pastor and just kind of see where he's at because, he might want to actually do right, but this is what he's being taught. He's not being taught correctly because, again, they're following the current trends, and the current trends are being driven by a lot of these guys who are all about the attention. They're all about the numbers. They're all about the pragmatism. So they're, again, on the lower levels, there are good guys that can be sucked into this. And this is what's really unfortunate, right? Because the model that the megachurch presents works for the megachurch. It doesn't work so much for the small church. A lot of times it ends up breaking up those smaller churches as opposed to helping them. It's like, to put it another way, it's like if we took, Bach, who's composing in a church for a particular class of people, and you tried to replicate that in some other church that's in a very small town that, doesn't have a huge pipe organ, doesn't have all the instrumentation, right? Well, you can't do it. But that's what they want to try to do. And they say, well, this is the style that you got to do if you ever want to grow. And so they end up discouraging and demoralizing a lot of these pastors in smaller churches because, well, I can't have a whole big band. I can't have a whole big production. So I guess my church is never going to grow.
Yeah.
And you've had some people in saying, well, yeah, you might as well just close your doors and just sell your buildings, which again is another form of evil.
No. And even then, well, let me just say this. The church is the people. The church is the people. The church is not necessarily always a place. Now, I come from an area in the Silicon Valley where my church very well might lose. We're going between buildings. Like we don't have a place actually to call our home. We don't actually have a home for our church. We're basically nomadic at this point, rent by rent, renting out one part of the building, the other part of the building. And a lot of it's due to zoning laws. I've oftentimes said you could have a church right out at a park and just, have people talk and preach. And there you go. That's it. You don't need to have.
Yeah, no, I'm not. But when I say disbanding the church, it's disbanding the church. So the church just ceases to, the people stop gathering and they go to other churches and then they sell the building. That's what some of these higher ups are recommending for a lot of these smaller churches is you just stop being a church and then you sell your building. Even if the church has been there for over 100 years, you just stop being.
What's this new age dark world of new age gurus thing, Luke?
Oh, I've been watching a lot of videos about MLMs and pyramid schemes, and a theme that has them all in there is like one of the things he talks about is how they try to incorporate spiritual language in the spiritual world. Because a number of these people, like just recently, I was someone trying Amway tried to recruit me, and one of his sales pitch methods was he's a devout Christian, and it is like a symptomatic of like trying to expand, like when you expand Christianity to something like into making money and making profit, because that's the implicit notion in this, is that it's missing the whole point. And it's also enslaving people to a whole mentality that's just not focusing on Christ, but focusing on servitude to worldly powers.
Well, I remember when I was in seminary, I was applying to a number of different churches to find a place to serve. And there was this one church where I was talking to the guy, and as I was doing an interview with him, he's like, yeah, we're a church. We don't call ourselves a church. And I'm kind of like rolling my eyes already. But then he's like, and then it got even where he's like, yeah, we don't really say Jesus and we don't really say God. We say the cosmic I, because people don't like the, God. There's a lot of baggage around it. So we want to say the cosmic I. And, we had some other name for Jesus, right? But it was a lot of this just sort of, new age stuff or whatever.
No, it sounds like fucking Mason shit. Crazy.
Yeah. And I'm almost like, I don't think I can do that. I was like, I can't say this is some other thing, but what I actually mean is Jesus, and I was like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I got to be honest. I believe in Jesus. I'm going to tell people about Jesus. I'm not going to call him something else. I mean, I'll call him the Christ or the Lamb or whatever else the Bible calls him, but I'm not going to call him some name that you just sort of made up. And I'm not going to call God the Great I. I mean, he's not Sauron, So,
oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, wow.
I mean, so, but it was very bizarre. And, just that whole concept, it just, like I said, it really blew me away because, I did never heard about this before. I'm like, this is weird. And again, it sounds like you're trying to trick people into the kingdom of God.
Well, the more they try to inject this, the farther away they go from the source material. Again, I'm a guy who even though I'm a Catholic, I have Latin, right? I still prefer the Greek and Aramaic simply because that's what I'm familiar with. And that's where I go to. Again, I'm oftentimes that Christianity, if it ever moves away from the gospel, it should be around the gospel. So like I say, well, learn Greek, learn church history, learn, what were the customs at the time, that's what I talk about. But, there are certain people out there who go far out there. They say, well, Jesus was like Jordan Peterson levels of freaking the Aquarian gospel type of crap,
Yeah. And again, right, it says something that people like Jordan Peterson and Nick Fuentes and, those various individuals, that they are revered as much as they are, despite their lack of knowledge on Christianity a lot of the times. And that's more of the problem that personally I would like to address in kind of my channel, right? Like, for example, Chris was talking about Andrew Torba and, how, he was kind of mocking him because he was boasting about building a chair. And again, I think it's stupid for Torba to boast about building a chair. But to me, there's the bigger issue isn't so much that Torba's boasting about building a chair. It's that people are responding. He knows by saying, I built a chair as opposed to watching a TV. There are a lot of people who are going to go, wow, man, that's awesome. And that says something about those people. Because they don't know how to build a chair because they're not doing that. And the fact that there's a number of people who see that and are like, man, that is so cool. That man, look at that Torba. Like that is the problem that I'd like to try to get to. Now, Torba, whatever, he can boast about it. But I mean, truthfully, him boasting about building a chair is like me boasting that I went to the bathroom and I didn't have to wear diapers anymore.
What, like you're a good carpenter, I'd imagine?
Well, no, but I mean, every man should have a basic understanding of how to build something. It's not a.
I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm like, what do you mean built a chair?
I don't know. I was hearing this from Chris, but apparently he just built a chair. So I don't know. Chris didn't seem to think it was a relatively impressive chair. But I mean, I'd say any man should know how to at least know the basic fundamentals of, construction to be able to build a chair.
Well, I mean, was it like a stool, or what are we talking about when it comes to a chair? I'm actually can I see this? Can I see the chair? I want to see the chair.
I don't know. Like I said, you'd have to.
I think that a more relevant equivalent would be like there was always this joke that men don't know how to change a tire on a car, And now it's gotten to the point where people are trying to go beyond that, not just that, but other things that they wouldn't normally do in their daily life. But you shouldn't be impressed by that kind of work. Realistically, you should be impressed by people who can articulate the truth and actually explain things to you and give you the information you need. But I guess we're so worldly that like replacing the tire is like more interesting than the truth.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's more practical, perhaps. Maybe it's something more relatable, even, which I think is, or not even relatable, but a lot more exotic. Like, oh my God, you made stuff that I could buy on Amazon. How badass is that? You know, again, we don't know what the chair is. I really don't know.
Like I said, I didn't know. This
chair.
is just something that Chris was mentioning in a stream when I was on with him. That was just a point. So, like I said, I don't know. I haven't seen the Gab. This is secondhand. But like the point is I'm sure because he said this, there were a number of guys who were like, you know, again, whoa, he built a chair. Now, like, again, all right, I'm all about, you know, the fact that Torba is learning and developing a new skill. Great. That's fine. Wonderful. Right.
Yeah.
But like I said, the bigger problem is there's a number of people who the fact that he's just doing that and doing something as basic as building, which I imagine would just sort of just be a basic chair. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. It's like, no, it's not. I was talking with someone the other day and I was just laying out what I thought was just basic biblical knowledge. And like, man, you've really studied this stuff,
This
you know,
is like-
whoa. And I'm like, I mean, again, I didn't say it, but I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, this is the basics. This is the ABCs of the Bible.
No, not even. And we haven't even gotten to find out. Again, the way they keep talking, I don't want to like focus on the chair because there's like the platonic chair and then there's I made a chair. I made a chair in wood shop, but I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't know the difference between, you know, treated wood versus not treated wood. And treated wood is for like outside use. And if you get a splinter, you can like get like really bad, really fucked up. Right? I didn't know that. So I got rid of that chair. Now, I actually want to see the chair because it's one thing to like, have skills and be competent in them. It's another thing how to apply them. And, you know, again, there's a lot of missing skills for men, not just from Christian men, but like men in general in the West right now.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Like I said, that is the problem that I would like to address is the fact that there are so many missing skills in men. You know, the fact that, again, they don't know how to do a lot of things. A lot of men don't know the basics on building. They don't know the basics on mechanics. They don't know the basics on first aid. You know, a lot of these aspects that just they don't know the basics on fighting. A lot of these things that, you know, their fathers, hope perhaps, or at least their grandfathers would have just known. And again, these are just the bare basics of being a man that almost any man to some degree would have some kind of understanding in a lot of these different areas.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I know how to check my oil. I know how to, check my fluids and what have you. I don't know how to change the oil. Oh, actually, I do know how to change the oil. It's just fucking very, very time consuming. And I'd rather fucking go spend money having someone else do it. That's just how I am. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, it's fine. I'm not saying you got to do that, but yeah, it's important to know how to do it, right? I mean, that's the thing. And again, you know, I mean, I'd sooner go buy a chair than build a chair. But the point is you know how to do it because, yes, these are useful things to know. And that there is something about being a man, I would say, that is inherent in knowing these things, you know, again, just on a basic level. But a lot of people, again, there's some men that they pick up a hammer, they wouldn't know what to do with it. In fact, I've met somebody before like that who really had never held a hammer in his entire life. He was 17 years old, never held a hammer before.
I'm going to tell you a story about this one kid I knew fucking back in the day. Okay. This fucker, he didn't know how to hammer in a nail. He literally did not know how to hammer in a nail. So like every time he'd hit it and he'd like hit it like one stroke. Like it's very hard for me to explain because like you and I, like everyone here knows how to use a hammer at this point. I think my chat's fairly intelligent. They know how to use a hammer. Okay. This kid kept fucking hitting it and one stroke and it was just bent. And then I said, just give me that fucking thing. Put it in. And he's like, oh my God, you could do that? This kid had a fucking mother he didn't have a father, for one. He was a bastard. Two, his mother was a fucking liberal, like, lawyer or attorney or some shit like that. Rich. But, you know, this is something that the kid didn't fucking have. You know, he didn't have a fucking a father to teach him that. And I did. I knew how to do it. So I guess that goes into the other thing, you know. The reason why Christianity is declining in the West, this is something that I've looked into, is that the church has become effeminized in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely, it has. You know, that's why you'll typically see a lot more women in there than men. And I mean, again, the sermons are a lot more about Well, at least from evangelical influence, it's become a lot more ambiguous. It's become a lot more, what do you feel and this kind of stuff, right? Which typically lends more towards a feminine way of thinking, as opposed to kind of being a little bit more, no, this is what it says, this is what it means, this is what you're supposed to do with it, that you've had in the past. Again, the idea of having a catechism and the idea of teaching that to people, that's something like, for example, Baptists are not against having a catechism. I'm holding in my hand a Baptist catechism from 1693, but you wouldn't know it looking at most Baptist churches nowadays. They wouldn't even know what the word is. They wouldn't even be able to pronounce the word catechism. And so basically, we get somebody, baptized, they believe, we get them baptized, and then we throw them out into the sea of the Bible and only give them maybe a Sunday sermon, maybe a quarterly Sunday school material as any type of indication of how to actually study the scripture and what they actually believe to be a Christian. Maybe you'll get a new believers class, maybe in some churches, but not in all of them. But the idea, again, of just, what do we actually believe? Having it written down, having questions. What does it say about this? What do we know about God? What does it mean to sin? Blah, blah, blah. Right? A lot of those questions that show up in a catechism, that's absent. Again, that was absent for a large part of my life. This is something that, by the time I got a call into the ministry and actually had to go, I had a lot of catch-up work to do because I was with a bunch of Lutherans and Methodists and Presbyterians and, who, not a whole lot of Roman Catholics. So there was a couple there. They knew a whole lot more church history than I did. They knew a whole lot more Bible, a lot more history of the Bible. I was very much behind. So much of my education was catching up because I had just had a lot of stories. I had a lot of Bible stories, so I knew a lot of Bible stories. I didn't know a lot of Bible, though, and there's a difference between knowing Bible and Bible stories.
Could you explain that? Are we talking like how the Bible, like the Bibles, like for example, the Ethiopian canon versus, let's say, the Roman canon versus, let's say, the Lutheran canon? Like, what are we talking about? The Bible, when you say the Bible, you say a Bible.
Well,
stories.
so I mean, in terms of, I guess, the general, regular 66 books, right? So, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Samuel, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, Judges, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, the various prophets, then the New Testament, not accounting the Apocrypha, then you have the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Titus, 1st and 2nd Timothy, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Hebrews, Peter, 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, James, Jude, and Revelation.
Right.
All those various books. And so that's what I mean with the Bible. Now, when I talk about Bible stories, like, I knew Abraham had to sacrifice his son Isaac, or God had called Abraham to sacrifice his son. I knew that Jacob had stolen Esau's blessing. I knew a whole lot of various stories about Jesus. But in terms of having the history laid out of, okay, this is Abraham, this is when he lived, this is how he's connected, this is what all of this means. Here is, what Philippians is about. Here's what Corinthians is about. That, growing up, I really didn't have that. So I had a lot of the Bible stories, but they were these disconnected stories that were just, again, more like Aesop's fables than actually the Word of God.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's like a children's Bible almost.
Yeah, but it's again, but you never sort of get out of the children's Bible.
No, you don't, and the reason is because you don't get to see it in context. You don't get to see it in the history of it. You don't know. Like, again, I've talked about this. I've talked about this show before called The Naked Archaeologist. It's basically this Canadian guy. He's a liberal, just forewarned because it's fucking television, but they go into like the history of, well, what did Joseph's coat of many colors look like? What were the games that were played by the Romans when they were casting lots for Jesus's clothings and possessions? Like, they go into that, and that's interesting because you get to see, what life was like back then, and you get to immerse yourself. I hate to use SJW terminology, in the culture, so to speak. It's so diverse and ethnic, so to speak, but they don't do that. They don't go into the history. They don't understand what Bible was being preached at the time of let's say Jesus. What was the they don't know anything about that. They don't have a cohesive history of the church, but also the Bible. And
Well, or
that's
even just a cohesive, I mean, again, biblical timeline. I mean, again, just, when was the Northern Kingdom destroyed and who destroyed them? When did the Southern Kingdom fall and who conquered it? What is the significance? Is Daniel before or after David? Is Ezra before or after Abraham? I mean, it wasn't even that. It was just, again, these disconnected, because a lot of the sermons that I heard growing up were topical sermons. And so these people were used as illustrations to push a particular point. And so the sermon construction was, what do I want to teach? Now, what Bible verses do I, pull to support that point? And that teaches people an incorrect way of studying the Bible. Because what it teaches them is that every time that you read the Bible, you're supposed to be pulling out some point of application. Yeah. And that's not always the case.
It's sophistry. It's so it pure and simple is sophistry. They just want to say, okay, I want to win the argument. I got to pull something out about prosperity. Oh, I got to pull out something about I got to do something about nonviolence. Here you go. I got to do something about following the leader or doing what society says. Here you go. It's sophistry.
Yeah. Now, I mean, imagine millions of people, right, or at least hundreds of thousands of people being taught that week after week for years. And for some people, this is the only Christianity that they ever get. And then you wonder, like, well, gosh, why is the church decline? Well, because we haven't actually been teaching or practicing Christianity.
Well, I think the one thing that will bring the church together is the fact that what is not out there, knowing what's out there. Like, I talk about a lot of like crazy shit on my podcast. You've probably seen it here and there. And I tell people, there's, whether it be Islam or these white nationalist Nazi satanic fuckers or whatever, if you know about that stuff, I guarantee you don't only want to be closer to God, the church, and friends of the church, and know your Bible, because you know what's out there now. And that sort of helped me. Like, one of the things I did was I've been very, very generous in donating things here to the church, and I also even been teaching a few kids how to, a few of the men, I should say, younger men, how to shoot. I've been teaching them that.
Well, like I said, one of the big things that helped me is in wanting to share my faith and, dealing with a lot of the questions that were typically asked by, atheists or Muslims or whatever, and wanting to answer those. I would have to be going to the scriptures in order to answer the question. So if they're talking about, Mark 12 actually disproves Jesus is the Son of God, because he says, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone, right? So, or, whatever. So I'd have to go then, and I'd have to read it, and I'd have to read it in context. So trying to answer a lot of those questions caused me to start reading my Bible a whole lot more. And then finally, just in the midst of answering all of those various questions, I finally got enough Bible to recognize and be able to keep it all in my head, to the point where it's like, now I can start seeing how all of these things are connected. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but actually, again, when I was actually taught what the faith is, what these doctrines are, what we actually believe, and not just a bunch of disconnected Bible studies. It was like that final gear within all of these other disconnected gears that allowed them to sync up and turn in sync. And so now going to the Bible is a lot of fun. Even when you come to a difficult passage, the answer is there somewhere. You just have to keep doing a little bit more reading. Again, you can read more in the scriptures, and that'll help you, because scripture interprets scriptures. And you can read other Christians. Okay, how have they looked at this before? What have they said? They're not on the same level as God, obviously. They're not the same as God's word, but there are a lot of smart guys out there who have written a ton of books on this. So you can go and you can read them. You can track their line of thought. How are they reading the passage? How are they getting from A to B? And so reading the Bible in that way becomes a whole lot more fun. Whereas I was reading it the other way, which was, what's the lesson that I'm trying to get out of it? It was never any fun, and it never made any sense.
Right. Now, what I was saying,
sorry
about that. What I was trying to say is that, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. What I was trying to say was that, you're right. I mean, you've heard the highlights of the book, of the movie as a kid, because you weren't old enough to appreciate it. Now you're an adult. Go read the Bible, and again, you read it before as a kid. Now it's time to read it all the way through. Do you know how many Christians do you know who read it all the way through?
Oh, very, very few. Most Christians that I know anyway. I do know some that will read it consistently, but a lot of the Christians I know, you're lucky if they're reading a chapter a day.
Yeah, like I'm guilty of this myself. I should read it more, but then again, I'm a Catholic, so I make a joke about that, but no. The truth of the matter is that you have to read. You have to read it more. You have to read like at least once a day. And guess what? Guess what? They have it on as audiobook on YouTube. You can just listen to it as you do your day. It's easy.
Someone made a chart recently, and I'm not saying that you have to do this, right? So again, don't hear me there, but someone came up with this whole graph, and essentially, I think what it said is that if people spend as much time reading the Bible as they do watching the TV, they would read their Bible through every month.
Jeez, I don't watch TV. I don't watch.
Well, that's
TV.
just looking at like regular averages and everything. But I'm not saying you have to do. I'm not saying stop watching TV and only read your Bible. Right? I'm just saying that the time spent on average watching TV, if people took that time and devoted to the scriptures, you can read it through in its entirety in a month.
Wow. That's again, maybe there should be a month or what have you to watch to read the Bible, to read the whole thing and just go right through it. And even if you have to like watch the Bible and like have like a live reenactment of what's going on, do it. I would get to of course I go to the source material and always go to the source if you can and read it. But I'm an audiobook guy, so I would do it every month if I could. Have that 1 month a year that you just go through your Bible. Whether it be during Christmas time or Easter time, New Year's even.
Well, I mean, again, just it's if you think about it, like reading other novels, right? I mean, would you read, I don't know what's a popular novel? Would you read the Chronicles of Narnia, 1 page a day, every single day? That's not how you read that, right? And I mean, granted, there's something to be said, right? For like something that I've started recently is I'll read 1 proverb a week, and then I'll just meditate on that 1 proverb for the whole week. So that's not the only Bible reading I'm doing. But again, as far as proverbs, so rather than just reading a whole bunch of proverbs, I'm taking that 1 piece of wisdom right there, and then so there is something to be said for that, right? But then sometimes it's okay to just keep on reading. You can read through a number of chapters because, again, sometimes there's some things in the Bible that are not as important as other things. So you can just kind of read through them, and they don't need as much of your brain attention as opposed to, what's happening. And
well, it's a proverb.
Yeah,
it's a proverb. It's not meant to like you could like have an entire thesis about the proverb if you wanted to. That's what it's designed to be. It's a proverb.
Yeah, universal truth. But I mean, again, there's other parts of the Bible like Genesis, what happens in Genesis 25 is, it's important, but it's not sort of on the same level as importance as maybe like what's happening in Ephesians 2, if you were, you can kind of get that and understand it, and then you can kind of go from there, as opposed to Ephesians 2, that takes a little bit more time and energy thinking about.
Right.
And that's what makes it interesting, right? Same thing for the Psalms. There's some Psalms that are very easy to get through, and then there's other Psalms that are very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're correct about that. I mean, honestly, I've been really busy this last few months or so. I should be definitely getting into my Bible a hell of a lot more. But I've been going to church more often, and I really do like the church. I like being around people, and I like. Again, I have to say it. I like the community behind it, but you need to start reading your Bible. That is something that is like it has to be with you at all times. Essentially, you have your phone, so there's no excuse.
Yeah, but I mean, the community is a great thing too, right? Being there because just like with being a man, there's a lot about being a man that can be taught, but then there's some things that have to be caught. You learn it by being around other men. And the same thing's true in Christianity. There's a lot of things that can be taught about being a Christian, but there are some things that really can't be articulated. They just have to be experienced, and you gain that experience by being around other Christians. This is why the Bible says, the older are to teach the younger. And it's not just, teaching them as far as what the scriptures say and everything, but teaching them by their examples, those things that, again, you can't exactly put them into words, but you know it when you see it. Like I said, that's why I like the expression, it can't be taught, but it can be caught.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many guys know how to actually, make a fire? Like I saw a flint and steel necklace. I was gonna pick up, but I said I don't even know how to use a flint and steel. So what the hell am I buying this for? How many people actually know how to use? How many people have actually gone camping? I remember I went to camping a lot back in the day.
Well, you can actually start a fire with a 9-volt battery and some steel wool too.
Yeah, there you go. I heard that you could start a fire with like a AA battery, and some a gum wrapper, I believe.
I've never heard that, but I know the steel wool thing. But yeah, but I mean, again, it's the same thing. And Chris has brought this up a whole bunch too. When guys hang out with each other, pardon the expression here, but they learn how to deal with other people busting their balls. They learn how to take a joke. They learn how to deal with people teasing them. And that's something that you can't be taught. You can't be taught how to deal with, teasing. And so that's why you can kind of tell the guys who never really hung out with a lot of guys, because, as soon as somebody teases them, they can get very, very sensitive about it, and they can't really tell the difference between when someone's just teasing you versus when someone's actually trying to be malicious. They kind of view it all as malicious. But again, you can't really teach somebody that. They just kind of have to get around other guys. And as guys tease each other, they sort of learn that. They kind of learn the ins and outs of, again, this guy actually has it out for me, or nah, this guy's just playing around. He's just goofing off.
I've Oscar Toast asks me, have you ever read Jack London to Build a Fire? Yes, I have. Beautiful story. Love it. It's a shame that's how Irini's going to go, I think. It's up in the Great White North of Canada, right? For sure. I don't know.
No, I haven't read that. What's it about?
Basically, it's about a guy who's going through, I believe, he's with his dogs, and he's going through like the Arctic winter of Canada, like the North. And eventually he finds out he has to build a fire, and he can't build a fire, so he freezes to death, essentially.
Oh, that stinks.
Well, it's interesting because it's told from it's a good story. I'd recommend it. It's pretty good. I read about it in school back in the day. Good story. I like it. Dog gets away though. The dog doesn't die. That's a good thing. But yeah. But that's one instance of it. The other one would be the dating. The dating in the West is bad. Like it's really bad. Like in the West for young men right now, it's bad for Christians especially. The decline of Christianity is partial because people keep making compromises for little things like do you know what dating unevenly yoked means, Pastor Tom?
Yes.
What do you know it to mean?
Well, in the basic sense, it would mean you do not date somebody, or you do not want to marry somebody who is not a Christian. So if it can be helped. So if you are a Christian and you're wanting to marry somebody and they're not a Christian, then you do not want to marry them until they become a Christian. So that's a very basic sense. There's also other ways of looking at this, though, to where if they just come from a completely different culture, maybe it's, in some instances here, you could look at this as a ethnic culture sometimes. And again, I'm not saying that I'm against, interracial marriage per se, but that can be an issue sometimes. It could also be a class struggle to where, you're just from very different, economic classes. In that instance there, that can also be a sense to where one is unequally yoked because the cultures that you grew up in are so different. They're so that they can become incompatible with each other. This isn't always the case, but it is something that you have to watch out for when dating. It's not like how it is in the movies where it's like, well, I'm from this family, well, I'm from this. Well, it doesn't matter because we just love each other. No, those things do matter. And they show up in how you want to raise children, and they show up in how you want to manage money. They show up in how you think about life and expectations there. So from a basic sense, unequally yoked can regard to one's faith and whether or not one has faith or not. But then again, even moving with that as well is, what is the culture? What are the values that one brings with them? Again, be they, economic class values or culture or ethnic culture, or even just different nationalities, being from different countries.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest reasons I think Christianity is in decline is that there's so much signal noise between our guys and other tribes guys, other religions guys, and girls even for that matter. I mean it's like where I'm at, it's a fucking toxic sludge. I mean, I'm literally in the heart of fucking darkness, the freaking eye of terror itself, the fucking Silicon Valley, and there's no women out here that aren't fucked up in some regard. But again, God's saving me for somebody else. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, how many guys are the same way? And I'm not trying to be like, oh, guys are just as bad. I mean, but I'm just trying to say it's like it's all like we're all in a death spiral. I'm glad I'm married. I mean, but I know that's cold comfort to everybody out there. But I remember when I was dating, it was very, very difficult for me. So that's been 7 years ago. So I know that it's changed and gotten worse since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten worse, and at the same time, the social norms that exist in the rest. Like I've sort of become an authoritarian in the last couple of nights. I've been thinking about really going hard authoritarian simply because if politics is downstream from culture, laws are downstream from morality and what's acceptable. I was talking about sin taxes at one point on this podcast, and then my freaking internet crapped out on me. I was talking about what, like, you could have like multiculturalism, but one culture is going to have to dominate the rest of them, and basically, tax the other cultures, or at least the social norms of the other culture. So like, I talk about, you don't want to drink too much. You don't want to be, so, you can have a beer here and there, but you don't want to drink yourself and your wife and kids into the poorhouse, right? So you put a tax on it. You put a tax on alcohol, whether it be hard liquor or beer or what have you. I think what needs to happen is, Fuentes is correct. You should take the state, but you need to basically take the state in order to just get rid of all the other cultures. One culture, one people, essentially. Now, the thing is, the good news is you don't need to do it on a national scale or even a statewide scale, just in your hometown. Just having, wherever bungfuck Midwest, Central California, whatever it might be, town, as long as you have that and you have like control of that, you could have a Christian community. But in the cosmopolitan hellscape of the city, you're not going to have that. You're always going to be fighting for, whether it be fighting the teachers because they're trying to get your kids to join some gender studies bullshit, or whether it be somebody who is trying to get your kid to become gay or some stupid, or convince them that they're like a girl, whatever the hell it might be. You're competing against a lot of people. So you need to be able to get rid of the signal noise of all the other cultural norms and values, because the law protects every single one of them.
Well, see, I wish, as a culture, we would be honest and say postmodernism is BS. We do, because nobody, even though we can sit here and say, well, there's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as objective truth. Nobody's acting like there's no such thing as objective truth. Why are they trying to convert your kid gay? Or why are they trying to push all the, this other nonsense? Because they believe objectively that it is true. So that's fine. Just say that then. You think you're right. You think that everybody else is wrong. Cool. And I can say that too then. I think I'm right. I think that you're wrong. And then we can, at least then we're discussing on what truth is, right? A lot of what's gotten us into this mess has been postmodernism that says, oh, there's no such thing as objective truth. There's just, it's relative and it's just whatever you think and everything's subjective and yada. And of course, again, right, that ultimately, well, I don't, why are you making a big deal about it, right? But at the same time, they say that, but that's not how they act. And that's how a lot of these people have, sort of the more evil among us, have gained a lot of powers, because they've used postmodernism to silence those who say this isn't right. Well, it doesn't have to look a certain way, man. Why are you being such a fanatic? But again, when they get into power, they are just as fanatical. And that's another thing where Christians were sort of foolish, is, they believed that there was some sort of neutral ground in which they could exist with secularism and all of these other different cultures, and there isn't. That was just a lie telling you to shut up.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's sort of why I believe that I don't believe in the rule of law anymore, because the rule of law, that basically encompasses this law that we have right now, the law of Reagan, the law of John Quincy Adams, but also the law of Hitler, the law of the Nazis, the Germans, and any authoritarian, or even the freaking king in some cases. The rule of law by itself is not inherently good. I believe in the rule of the spirit of the law, and we get to decide what the spirit of the law is as a culture. And so this is where I've gone to the whole authoritarian notion, is that we have to kind of force social behavior and sanity upon society. At least in the society we could reach at. We can't, like, maybe at best we have the Midwest be by, or like we'll have a Bible Belt, let's say. But like, again, the way the state is set up right now, the way the culture is set up, everybody's fighting for the state control. They all want to wipe out their rivals. Even the conservatives will agree to this to some degree. They just don't feel comfortable about saying it right now. You know?
Well, yeah, and again, this is, it's another problem, because one of the issues with society in general. Have you ever heard of the idea of the three estates?
Yeah, I've heard of this.
You've got the state, you've got the church, and then you've got the home.
Yep.
And so what we've seen happen is that the church and the home have been eroded. They have been deconstructed. And so the state has absorbed those estates. And as such, society is breaking down, because, the state is where the laws are. And, that's where the laws and the politics are, right? The church and the home is supposed to be where the culture is. And so as those have been eroded, well, now it's just becoming much more about the state. And essentially you've had this new entity, media, coming in, entertainment and media, and that has taken the place of both the home and the church. And this is kind of what, you were talking about with bowling alone, right? To where people are dropping out of these institutions. They're not bowling anymore. They're not, being in the Boy Scouts or First Aid. They're not going to church, right? And so those estates are sort of crumbling. Even the families are beginning to crumble. So that leaves a vacuum for the state to come in and to control everything, and that doesn't work.
It's not even that anymore. Again, you have to understand about bowling alone is that was written before the internet. That was like 1998, 1999. That book came out. There was, they talk about feminism in that freaking book, and at the same time, they didn't. This was before the internet. This was before the ability to massively mobilize online, and offline as well. One of the things I was going to say about it is that everyone's an atomized individual. But one of the things I was going to say besides that was that they're no longer just declining institutions. They're becoming undead, like a zombie virus. I think it's like the SJWs basically wear the face of the franchise. That they say, I am Star Wars. I am Star Wars. They wear the fucking face like it's like was it Skinhead? Not Skinhead. Pinhead. What the fuck is his name? Leatherface. Yeah, that's what they're doing. It's not just that they're just collapsing and it's gone. They're gone forever. They're being rebuilt in the image of our enemies.
No, they are. I mean, again, I think, in some instances they have been replaced by, the media, the entertainment media and social media and that kind of stuff. They are attempting to supplant them and replace them. But like I said, a lot of this is defaulted to the state. This is why a lot of people, when they say, when they don't like something, what do they say? There needs to be a law against this, right? COVID's a great example to this. People want to use the government, the force of the government, to force people to act in a particular way for their own personal security, right? It's not a matter of, we have freedom and we can use societal pressure to encourage people to whatever. No. The government has to come in and do this. The government needs to be the one doing these things. And so that's what happens when you've seen these other two institutions or estates basically be killed or, eroded away, is the state then absorbs that power. But again, the culture there, it's trying to build culture and political power off of remnants. And so what you end up with is a lot of lawless gangsters in place of power, which, is what we have right now. And so we end up with a rule of man, not a rule of law, but it's not just men ruling us, it's gangsters.
Yeah, it's anarcho-tyranny.
And again, you can see that with COVID. You can see that with the protests. They don't care. They're not caring about any kind of sense of justice. It's just what's convenient to me.
Yep, they're egotists. They're egotists, and they ultimately just don't care about anybody but themselves. And this is why I say Christianity needs to do the same thing. It needs to take the state, take the ground, take it, and then again, we're in a team deathmatch, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a team deathmatch, and ultimately the first person to 30 wins, and that's what we have to do. We have to start taking back our culture, and by doing that, by taking back the institutions. How do we take back the institutions? Well, we'll slowly move in.
Yeah. And you actually have to have something different to take it back with, right? I mean, if you can't take back the culture by essentially, though, being the exact same as the culture. I'm not talking about necessarily in terms of tactics, right? But I mean, there has to be a noticeable difference between the life of the Christian versus, the life of the secular pagan. If there's no distinguishable difference between the two, then really what's the point? I mean, you're waving the Christian flag, but if it's just as lawless and pointless, you've only done more harm to Christ in the long run.
Yep.
So you have to actually be Christian.
So the question then becomes, how do Christians act? Like, one of the things I don't like, and this is something that I've seen, is that I don't like the uniform. I don't like going to church in a suit. I don't like doing that. And the reason I don't like doing it is because most people just do it because you're supposed to do it. It's a truism, You're just supposed to just show up to work, or not work, but a church in a suit. Yeah.
Now, why is that a truism, though?
I don't know. I mean,
here's what I would say is the reason why it's a truism is because when you're going to church, you are going to be in the presence of your God, right? So would you wear a suit if you were meeting the president? Would you wear a suit if you were meeting the Pope? Most people would probably say, well, yes, I would. And so it's like, okay, so if you would wear a suit for these very important people, well, then as you are going to worship God, going into the place of worship, and for the purpose of worshiping, giving praise, giving adoration and supplication, and hearing his word proclaimed to you, you would thus want to dress appropriately for that situation.
Right. And
now, you don't have to do that, but it does reflect a certain attitude of understanding. It's the same reason why the priest wears the robes.
Yes, I agree. And the problem here is that no one wants to do it. No one gets told that's why you do it.
Yeah.
And even then, if it's showing in your best, I mean, I could show up in PF flyers, which, I got more compliments for those than I think the suit I've ever worn, I'm not saying, go in there and peacock and distract people from the sermon or where the priest is or pastor is saying, but you should go in in your Sunday best. And I think that's something we should all do. You may not have a good blazer, but you have a nice vest. Go in with the vest. Make an effort.
Well, like I said, I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just that's the reason behind it, right? And again, that's one of these other things that evangelicals have chucked out, right? They're like, no, that's how they did in the past. Everything in the past is bad, so this is new, so it's going to be better. So everyone just sort of wear whatever you want. But again, that does sort of seem to reflect the attitude that what we're doing here really isn't all that important, right? It's the same reason, like in regards to how the buildings are set up, right? I mean, obviously you can go crazy with this, but why are church buildings different from other buildings? Well, from the thinking of the traditional thinking on this, the older thinking on this was that, well, because we don't want you to think about being in the church as a part of being in the rest of the world. That's why it's called a sacred space. It's sacred in that it is set apart from every other space out there. So we want it to look different because it's supposed to be different, because it is here where you have gathered to worship that, again, the Lord is present. And that is why it is ultimately sacred, is because God is there, but we, to help, facilitate that, not in the sense of, in your mind, to help you understand that, we're going to make it look different as well. It's also why they have, a lot of churches have very tall ceilings. Why? Because we want you to lift your mind upward. We want you to think upward. I'm not saying that you have to do this. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not being a legalist about this. I'm just explaining the intention behind the design in this. And the very, fantastic imagery where to, express the grandeur and glory of God in the building. Now, can you worship God meaningfully in a gymnasium? Well, yes, you can. And I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying this was the intention behind the people when they were building churches originally, is they wanted it to look different because it's supposed to be different. You're not supposed to be feeling the same way when you're worshiping God as you are when you're shopping or when you're watching a movie or when you're doing all those other things. Now, like I said, do you have to do that? No, but that was their thinking. Has that been tried and, true for a long time? Well, yes, it has. But is it necessary? No.
No, it's not necessary, but it works. It works. And, maybe it's time to go back to what works instead of what is, well, not even what works. Because, again, what do you mean by what works? Like, what is the measure of success? It's not fucking numbers, as we've already established. It's not, winning the argument. It's building on what you have, like I've been a part of a lot of churches in my lifetime, and the one I'm currently in right now, the Catholic Church, granted, it's on by itself, its own little group, it's struggling. Now, a lot of it could be because, we're in the fucking belly of the beast, And we don't, and but more likely it's because zoning laws and things such as that.
I'd say too. I mean, just all this stuff with COVID, that's going to be a whole lot of trouble too. I mean,
Yep.
No one wants to meet, especially. I mean, again, being in California, no one's going to want to meet anywhere.
Nope. Yeah. I mean, so that's one reason. The lack of knowledge of what's going on in the Bible, not just Bible stories, and people basically just wanting to make it about numbers. What else do you think is going wrong with the West or in Christianity, or the decline, I should say?
Well, I mean, so yeah, I mean, that's, from the leadership perspective is right. It's all about the numbers. So you don't want to teach it. From the laity perspective, again, I would, the word I would use would be idolatry. And it's not like going and worshiping, Zeus or Hera or anything, but essentially, idolatry is when you place something above God. And so for a lot of people, there are a lot of things that they place above God. Take relationships, for example. If you're like, I don't care that you're a Muslim, or I don't care that you're an atheist, all that matters is our love. Well, you're not necessarily placing them above God, but in many ways, yes, you can be placing them above God, right? Because, okay, this is somebody who does not believe the same God that you are, but yet, you want to give them a say in, the raising of your children. You're going to create a lot of this conflict here, but no, it's, your feelings towards this person here. Well, that's more important than the rest of that.
It's Romeo and Juliet, right? That's what they'll say. Yeah. But the problem is they don't even know what Romeo and Juliet's about.
And how did that story end?
well, that's the whole point. I mean, it's ended exactly as it should have ended. A teenage romance ending in bloodshed, probably.
Right. I mean, again, one of the big things I have a problem with, like from in my area, is sports ball, be it, basketball, soccer, baseball, whatever. So many people, parents and families are gone because their kids are doing that on Sunday morning. Now, I mean, call me crazy here, but if, you're telling your kid, we're not going to go worship God because we've got to go play, sports ball consistently, then in effect, what you're telling your kid is that, well, sports ball, this extracurricular activity in your life, that's more important than God. So really, how important is God to your kid and really to you? What are you really saying? I mean, and again, I know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but at the same time, well, the results do kind of speak for themselves. There's a lot of people who, again, any reason they can come up with to miss church, well, they'll come up with it. And that's really the long of the short of it is there's just a lot of things that we would rather have, and not just church, but just in terms of God, when people say, look, I know that God's word says not to do blank, but I'm going to do it anyway. Well, that's idolatry. You're deliberately doing something that God said not to do. So you're putting that thing above God in that moment.
Yep, that is idolatry. I would say, it was the old saying, no person can have two masters, I believe.
Yeah, that's what Jesus says, Now he's talking about money and that, and of course that's the other thing. And again, this is another one of the areas to where the boomer generation really sort of, screwed us in a lot of ways because the culture was set up to accommodate them to go to church. You didn't work on, no one really was open on Sunday because people were going to church. They didn't do a lot of the soccer practices and stuff on Sunday and Wednesday because they knew people were going to church. But as the boomers sort of got out of that, they got less disciplined about going to church. Well, that created an opening for that. And so now for the next generation, well, now it's that much harder because whereas before they didn't have to make the choice, now they do have to make the choice. Because these organizations have stepped in to try to fill basically a gap.
Yeah.
And so,
and again, a lot of this is due to the fact that the lack of civic engagement from Christians. I've talked about how I know a lot of Catholics even that are like, oh, I don't want to leave anything for my son or my daughter. I'm married, but everything's going to burn up in the end of the day. Everything's going to burn up in hell, and I'm going to be in heaven with Christ. I'm like, but shouldn't you leave something behind for your kid? Like nobody prepares for that. They akin to worldly prosperity to somehow it's bad. Like it's not like, again, everything I have, all my stuff is for my kids, and even then I'm not attached to it, but there's like this either all or nothing thinking with evangelicals and Christians in general, where you either full materialist and you acknowledge materialism as a reality, not necessarily as the be all end all, but or you deny it and you just focus on heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea of leaving a legacy of some kind, right? So, I mean, and you're correct, right? A lot of times people would want to leave a legacy for their kids because that's something that, if you wanted to leave a legacy in art or poetry or music or technology, I mean, you got to be pretty talented in order to do that. I mean, you've got to have, there's a lot of competition. You've got to stand out there. I mean, you've got to, and not everybody can do that. Right. There's only certain people who have really left a lasting legacy in a lot of those realms, but everybody can leave a legacy for their children or, for someone else. If you don't have any children or you don't want to have any children, that's something that everybody could do. And you're right. A lot of people are just, whatever. I don't care, and again, as someone, who is a child, right? I mean, it is a great gift when, your loved one, your father or your grandfather or something, that they do have something to pass down to you, that they have given you a legacy, that they, if it is wealth that they have saved up, that they've put into, and now they're handing it on to you. Now you can take that and then you can go and do something with it. This is, one argument, that the critical race theorists have right in a sense that generational wealth does make a difference. And of course, again, the thing that you'd have to say is, okay, so start to accumulate some wealth that you can pass down to the next generation. Stop spending it all.
Yeah, exactly. I've told this to people, and so far all I have is trinkets, to be honest with you.
It's the same way of thinking, right? I mean, of course, like, again, parents, again, and I know I'm going to get told I'm crazy for saying this, so I'm just already just prepared for that, right?
Just go right ahead.
Parents tell their kids in our country, when you're 18, get out of my house, leave, go away from me, and then they're surprised when they're old that their kids don't like them as much. We look down on a kid living with his mom and dad, like, right? I mean, again, on the one hand, I get it, right? When you get married, you need to have a house, you need to be doing it. But at the same time, like, does it come across to the parents? It's like, this is the house that when I die, I want my kids to have.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't. No, they don't. Now, at the same time, that being said, the biggest problem I've seen is that, like I said, they don't want to pass anything on. They don't want to. They're not setting themselves up for that. And a lot of that is because, I don't know. I think a lot of it's Gnostic and its origins. It's the Gnostic notion that either we're full-on hedonists and the world is bad, so therefore we should all just be bad, or, the world is the material world's bad, we should reject it and not have kids. Like Gnosticism has been inflicted upon on the Christians of the West. It really has.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, and again, we don't understand the fact that we have bodies and that our bodies can react to things and that can have an effect on us spiritually. I mean, we draw this, like, this big distinction where it's like, oh, I have this happening spiritually, but here are also the physical side effects of that. Well, the two might actually be connected, but we say, no, this is completely something separate from this other spiritual issue over here.
Getting fucked in the ass probably does change your psyche or change your soul to a certain degree.
C.S. Lewis had a good illustration of this in the Screw Tape Letters when he says that
I hope not.
You must first and foremost remember that they are they said you must always remember what they must constantly forget, that they are animals and what they do with their bodies greatly affects their souls.
Yeah, I mean yeah.
Well, and I mean, again, when we disconnect it from reality, right? Like, and just an example for this, like I preached on Jacob wrestling God this morning, right? And before this here, Jacob, he's afraid of meeting Esau, right? He thinks Esau's going to kill him, and so he's making all of this preparations for his family to, like, be able to get away in case Esau is hostile towards him, right? You would not believe the number of commentaries that I've seen. It's like, Jacob's trusting God, but look, he's still trusting. He's supposed to trust God, but he's having all of these schemes still. He's trusted in that, and so God had to break him by wrestling him, and that's what the whole point of this. It's like, did you actually read what happened there? I mean, Jacob having a plan for his family to be able to escape is not him trusting in his own schemes as over his God. He's already prayed to God. And God's not breaking him when he's wrestling him. He's affirming him. He's showing him, hey, I'm going to bring you through this. That's the whole point of God wrestling Jacob there, is he's saying, he's affirming Jacob in that. That's why he changes his name from Jacob to Israel after that. It's not about God breaking Jacob, but that's what we want to say, because it's like, oh, if you have you use wisdom and you have a plan set up, oh, you must not be trusting God apparently. But then at the same time, we want to tell people, well, you do and you don't, and we kind of confuse them with that, right? Oh, well, don't trust God, but then, well, you got to have a plan, and so it's like, well, your religion's nonsense. Why do I even bother listening to it? I mean, but that's what evangelicals tell people. It's frustrating because it doesn't make any sense. It's contradictory.
Yeah, and a lot of it is Gnosticism. A lot of it boils down to Gnosticism. It boils down to basically just denying reality in favor of idealism. A lot like, I think Tay Spaghetti said best. Everything boils down to Aristotle versus Plato to a certain degree. And a lot of people, they want to have the beatific vision, but at the same time they deny the here and now, and everyone suffers because of it. You were talking about leaving a legacy. One of the legacies we could leave our kids is having a good legal system that's fair, or having a good system of laws that's fair. I mean, I talked about obscenity laws, like, on freaking Friday, I found out who Alice Cooper was. I didn't even know who Alice Cooper. I've heard of him here and there, but like, there's a song called "No More Mr. Nice Guy," right? And it's about being obscene, And there's a lot of fucking shit out there that is absolutely obscene. And eventually, what's going to happen is these laws, the way things are going, again, it would never get to this point if we still had institutional control. They're weaponizing all the laws against people, against their opposition, and the obscenity law is the same way.
But you don't always need institutional control. I mean, it doesn't always have to be governmental power. You can apply societal pressure as well, right? And that's that's why it needs to be a cultural thing. There's a lot of pressure that can be applied socially, right? And again, I mean, the nice thing about that is that for a lot of people, because again, right, this is one of those things where you just have to recognize the reality of the situation. There are some people who can be independent people, and they can be the exception to the rule, and that's fine. But there's a lot of other people who all that they care about, they don't want to be the exception. They want to be the rule. They just want to go along to get along. And so if you like what we're currently at, well, then that's fine. But if you'd like, this kind of sucks and you're the exception to the rule, then don't promote you being the exception being the rule, because this is where this ends up. So again, right, if, for the people who are the exception, whatever, they can be obscene, but, whatever, again, because there's an exception, it's okay. But not everybody can live like that, right? Some people, they can be the exception, but not everybody. And that's been another issue here, is that we've taken all of these people who are the exception and we've tried to make them the rule. Because we try to tell everybody what? Well, you're special. Well, again, not everybody's special. And I say this as someone who's not special. I'm not special. I'm a dime a dozen. I don't want to be special.
You speak clearly. I mean, that's better than I could say for myself. But
the whole point, right, is like I said, but that's what we've all been told. And so we've made these people who are, again, really should be the exception to be the rule. So we can't apply societal pressure here, because we recognize that ultimately it's good that they're, again, by having certain things being abstained from, you actually have more liberty. But it doesn't necessarily have to be governmental force. And this is where you can, I think, find the difference between societal pressure versus governmental pressure. And I say that because there's some people who, they'll hear this and they'll hear talking about this and they're like, oh, you're just a bunch of authoritarians. You just want to tell people what to do. It's like, no, I don't. I personally do not want to tell people what to do. However, if you don't give people any instruction, they're just, a lot of times they are just going to be lost, and somebody's going to be telling them what to do. And they're going to go with whoever's doing that. So it's like, again, I think that's the point that you're making. It's like, well, Christians, if you're not going to give them any instruction, someone else is. And so they're just going to listen to that person as opposed to you.
Yep.
And that person doesn't have their best interest in mind. That person isn't telling them the truth.
That person's going to sell them to the salt mines. Yeah.
Oddly enough, this is actually probably the reason why Jordan Peterson is so popular, is because no one's giving them instructions.
All right.
Yep.
And I mean, that's why, clear teaching, that's why a lot of people like Steven Anderson, despite, whatever his stuff there, he's at least clear in where the expectation is. And again, as a lot of people say, a lot of people want a daddy to tell them what to do. Well, yes, a lot of people do want a daddy to tell them what to do. Not everybody needs a dad. Some people are exception, but a lot of people do need that. And so again, okay, Christian, you can either be that for them, or you can try to be the idealist and say, well, laissez-faire, you guys figure it out and we'll just sort of be here. Well, okay, we've seen where that ends up. We've seen what happens when we stop actually teaching what God actually says about these things. And there was something else, but I kind of got off track with that. But anyway, but yeah, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good, man. It's good. It's good so far, so good. But I don't trust Jordan Peterson. I think that there's going to be a large push for Gnosticism, not overtly in the next few years by this guy. I believe he's going to pushing it like Timothy Leary was pushing LSD, because you know that Peterson was took Timothy Leary's job at Harvard when Timothy Leary was done with it. You know that, right?
I do now.
Yeah, well, now you know. You also should know that he's shilling LSD, so stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, well, like I said, when a lot of people back in 2016, whenever he first got popular, a lot of people are telling me about Jordan Peterson. I listened to him. Back in 2016, Peterson was a liberal from 40 years ago. All right, you go back, listen to what Peterson's saying and go back and read what was, coming out of Southeastern Seminary from about 40 years ago before the conservative resurgence. You'll find a lot of the same similarities. That's just where he's operating from. He's not really saying anything new. It's a lot of that same stuff like, oh, Jesus is representative of all of mankind's stories. And that's really what he's supposed to be, is he's sort of just this figure of, the ultimate, man in the story, right? And he's nothing more than that. Like I said, I've heard that before. I've read people who have said that before. That's not anything new. And that's where he's at.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not good. I'm just saying, like I said, he's not original. I'm not saying he's plagiarizing, but what I'm saying is, nothing new under the sun.
Exactly. We've seen this type of bullshit before, and it's not really impressive once you understand where it's coming from.
Right. Same thing with a lot of the Marxism stuff. That's nothing new. And again, you can trace a lot of the stuff like the pragmatism and the mysticism that everyone's got involved in, even the legalism. And a lot of this stuff is just, it reacts to each other. So I predict that in the coming years, we will see a whole lot more self-help. That'll become more and more popular. And that'll be the big shift in a lot of Christian circles. They'll shift away from helping neighbor back to self-help. And then later on down the road, they'll shift back to self-help, to helping neighbor, because they're just kind of reacting to the culture. Because all of this is right now about, justice and, fighting for, BLM and all this kind of stuff. That's a reaction to the boomer generation because they were all about themselves.
Yep. And the truth be told is the boomers went deep into themselves. And I think what's going to happen is there's a push to have the millennials go deep into themselves to a certain degree. And there is some truth that the millennials do need to go deep into themselves.
Well, they do, but just in the right way.
Exactly. There's self-reflection and there's self-masturbation, essentially.
Well, and there's actually taking care of yourself. Like one of my favorite quotes that I found recently, and I don't know who said it. I read it recently. Everyone wants a revolution, but no one wants to do the dishes.
Yep.
And that's the thing. We're so busy out there trying to change the world that our houses are becoming dirtier and dirtier and more rotten because we don't want to take care of our own houses. Well, I've got all of my personal demons. I've got all these mental health issues. But here we go. I got to go help you rather than deal with those personal demons. And doesn't that make a very convenient excuse that I'm so busy helping you and fighting injustice that I can't deal with my own very, real demons affecting me?
Yeah, I guess that's something that you'd have to be shown, right? You'd have to be shown that.
That's actually a segue of you said before, Dashing, that we're all basically Aristotle versus Plato, but really it's Aristotle, Plato versus Marx.
Yep. Well, Marx was a Platonist. You know that, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the whole Marxist ideology is very much a Platonic notion that we're going to have a utopia. We're going to have the perfect society, not just perfect in perfect in terms of this is perfect. Like we objectively can say this is perfect.
And we know better. No one perfectly embodied the idea of ignoring his personal responsibility for the revolution than Marx did, to the point where he would let his children and wife were starving to death in the house while studying in a library.
Yeah.
Oh well, hey, there you go. Thank you, Luke. That brought me to my point. You guys know John Piper?
No, I don't.
Yeah, and Luke's probably going to know I go. Oh, John Piper is a very, very popular pastor. All right, and again, speaking on this very issue, you know what he said he would do if someone breaks into the house with the intention of raping his wife?
What?
He will just sit there and pray while it happens.
What?
What?
Yeah, that's what he said he'll do.
Men like this can have wives. Yeah, I can't even fucking get a date. What the fuck?
What?
You didn't know that he said that, Luke?
I haven't been following him recently.
Yeah, no, that's what he said. Is that this is a while ago. He said this like a few years ago. But yeah, if
Sticks wonders why. You know, at this point, I kind of want to help Sticks in fucking bashing Christianity because that's fucking evil. No, that's not even evil. That's just fucking cuck shit. Jesus Christ.
What? How do you justify this?
Well, because you're not supposed to repay evil for evil. You're not supposed to resist the evildoer. So, that's he's just supposed to just pray that God will give him and his wife the strength to get through this while this happens, and that maybe the police will come and step in because they're the only ones who could have the authority to do anything about it.
Oh.
Now, I remember reading in Deuteronomy that if someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night and they die, their blood's not on your hands. Because if someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night, as my concealed carry teacher told me, they're not breaking in to give you a cupcake.
Yeah,
assume they're there to do you harm. You don't know why they're there. And so guess what? If you fight with them and they die, then yes, again, biblically speaking, right? I mean, there are, again, don't think that as well, but there are differences. Like if they're running away and you go after them, that's different. But if someone breaks into your house and you get the drop on them and you shoot them and you kill them, biblically, you haven't done anything wrong. You've done something right because you've protected your family.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, again, right? And I talked about this recently in my last stream where I was like, as a man, if you're married, that you have that responsibility for your wife is you have to go out and put yourself in danger for the sake of your wife. That's partly what it means to love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave his life up for the church. You have to, in the sense, give your life up because you're putting yourself in danger facing the person breaking into your house for the sake of your wife and for your children. That is the duty of a man biblically. Now, if you're not married, a little bit of a different story. But again, if someone's breaking your house, you do have a responsibility to protect your life. I mean, God does care about life.
Yeah.
Of course, again, he points to other examples with Christ and stuff, which, is very different, right? Things with the apostles. And a lot of the times that has more to do with, government authorities in particular situations, as opposed to, somebody violently trying to attack you either on the road or in your house or something. I mean, the bigger question that Christians would really have to wrestle with and figure out is, when is it okay to organize against your government and have armed force against your government, instead so much of asking the question of self-defense. Self-defense really shouldn't be a question for Christians. Like I said, the question of when is it okay to organize against a tyrannical government, that would be, I think a more difficult and interesting question for Christians to really wrestle with.
Yeah.
If it is ever okay. I mean, like I said, if it ever is okay, and then when is it okay?
Well, first off, I would say, I would start at the bottom level, because it's not going to be the feds that come after you unless you do something like, let's say, what the hell was his name? What was his name? Oh, the guy from not Ruby Ridge. What was it? Oh, David Koresh, that guy, right? Unless you do something like that, the feds are not going to come after you. The feds are not going to come after you for that reason. You're more likely to encounter, let's say, the city council or some sort of like homeowners association telling you to keep it down or something like that. You have it really good right now in regards to resisting the government and all its forms, or at least the form that you're more likely to encounter. It's really good, but yeah. There's going to be a time when you might have to. Now, I've seen too many Christians who just want to lay down and take it. They want to lay down and take it. They think that they're not worthy to exist in this world. This world's just transitory, so therefore just take it. And to me, that's suicide.
Well, I mean, it is, and it's, I mean, again, you don't have to stay here. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Christians fleeing per se. Like, when persecution first comes to Jerusalem, they flee, and eventually the church in Antioch is started by a number of the Christians who were fleeing from the persecution in Jerusalem. So when persecution comes, you don't have to remain there. You can flee. But if you do choose to stay there, you can't just stick your head in the sand, and you can't just, say, well, you don't seek out martyrdom. You do what you're supposed to. And then if it happens, it happens, but you do try to avoid it if you can, as long as you're not, putting your own life essentially ahead of the gospel. Right. So, I mean, but what that looks like is, deny whatever belief it is, belief in Jesus or some other belief, or, we're going to kill you. And it's like, well, okay, well then fine. I guess, you got me. You're just going to have to kill me. I'm not going to recant. That's what true martyrdom looks like, right? Martyrdom doesn't look like just allowing someone to just, beat you up.
Yeah, no, that's sort of you're not wrong about that. Turning the other cheek does not necessarily mean just get wailed on. No, you fight back with proportionate force. I mean, if someone punches you, you don't just draw your gun and shoot them. Now, if they continue to punch you, then you might do it. But if they just punch you like, ow, that hurt, you don't pull a gun and shoot them. But they just continue to hit you, you fucking hit them back.
Right. There's a big difference between somebody punching you and that's just sort of it. They're just sort of punching you, right? Or they just sort of slap you or something, versus somebody trying to take your life. If somebody just gets mad and punches you, you don't necessarily have to punch them back. That would be repaying evil for evil. You can, forgive it and let it go and just let them get away with it. But if they're trying to attack you and they keep, like you said, wailing on you, and they're trying to take your life, then yes, defend yourself. Yeah.
No, yeah.
And like you were saying, it's that weird concept to where it's all or nothing. And it's amazing how often I've seen that be the case, to where it's all or nothing. The idea that something can be a little bit nuanced, or it's like, well, okay, in these situations, here's why, versus in these other situations, again, understanding the context, understanding, a very clear distinction, it's different. And then we treat it all the same. But it's simpler if you think about it like that. It's simpler if it's just all or nothing.
Yeah, it's all or nothing thinking that these people have. And, I've told people, like right now I'm reading I'm reading a lot of game books. And again, as somebody who, let's be frank, I don't like game. I'm a big proponent against game, simply because, I think it's deceptive and you're not being yourself. You gotta know both sides of the equation. You gotta know both sides of where the person's coming from and where you're coming from on this. I don't like game because I think, like I said, it's deceptive, but at the same time, I gotta know it. Because let's just be frank, some of these girls are not even dateable. Like, they're the type of people who will fuck you on the first date, even in some cases. And then when you reject them, they act like you are the one with the problem.
So what are the game books like? What do they say? What are they trying to like communicate? Is it just like, here's how you talk to girls, or here's how you get in their bed, or what?
A lot of it's fake it till you make it. I'm looking into Rush v. Bang right now. That's what I'm going to be going to when I'm finished with that one, I'm going to be going over to what was it? The Catholic Red Pill. I'm going to look into that one. That was something that Aaron Clare was shilling. I said, why not? I'll try that out.
Yeah, as someone who actually has heard like both of the Bang and Day Bang, basically the general premise is how to make yourself more desirable to other women, whether through clear means or rather or manipulative means. Like, one of the things, like the analogy I think he uses that is, when you see a stray cat, you can't just walk up to the cat. You have to let the cat be comfortable around you.
Yep, and it's all about to turn. Easing down a woman's defenses, which, again, is a good thing to have, not just for women, but for men and for, bosses or situations. It's more life skills. But, the notion behind game and how you weaponize it and go after girls and for deliberately, you don't want to be Don Juan, okay? You don't want to be running around, screwing everything and then ending up, in hell for that shit. You don't want to do that. Or you don't want to be Rush V. Look at Styx is really bashing Rush V the other day. He was fucking pull it up for you. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah, Rouge is an example of one who pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, to almost like the puritanical, legalistic mentality.
It's the trad cat. It's the trad traditionalist Catholic retirement plan. Everyone, no, like I've oftentimes said, there's a thing called the trad cat retirement plan, specifically because the trad cat retirement plan is there for those who are degenerate. Like I think it was like the Sasha Grey. It was Sasha Grey basically talking about how women should save themselves from marriage, or it's like a meme, whatever. That actually exists. There are women out there who will be absolutely whores through their 20s and probably mid 30s, and then become nuns or something like that. That's what they'll do. Or not even nuns, but they'll like basically start judging you if you start going in the same path that they were on. Here we go, Luke. This is what sticks left. Origin story of Rouge. Look at the origin story, which I think is bullshit, by the way.
All right, everybody. Now it's time to tell you about the origin story of Rouge.
Yep.
Sorry, I love the uniformity of Styx's videos.
Yeah, we're gonna tell you. That's one of the things. I think that guy is kind of. I don't know. Did you hear him talk about what's the Vermont schools? Starts running his mouth about special ed. I think that guy is special ed, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised, and that's not to insult the man. He's the type of guy. He's one of those people. Anyhow.
No, like I said, generally in terms of his takes, I do like a lot of just sort of his kind of basic takes on things, but it is kind of how he does his videos. Like I said, every video starts out with "All right, everyone," and then it kind of ends out with "That's about all." Peace out.
Yep.
Which he sounds just like the guy from Napoleon Dynamite when he says that.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Peace out, Napoleon. It's like, that's about all. Peace out.
He is Napoleon Dynamite. Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, like I would add to the thing that's destroying the West is basically, like you said, black white thinking when it comes to materialism. Either you can go all the way and become totally materialistic, or you could just be a Gnostic and deny the material. And I don't think that's something there's somewhere a balance in between the two. But the question is, why do you want to acquire wealth? Well, I want to pass on to my kids. Okay. Why do you want to say the dark art of game? Because I want to go meet girls and I want to fuck them on the first date. That's something you can't be doing, but it's more of a tool and it, like a knife, you can cut someone, or you could serve a steak to your friend,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think about it as, that's the difference between, idolatry versus enjoying what God has created, right? When you're enjoying God's creation, you're recognizing that ultimately these things are means toward an end. But idolatry is when you take creation and you make it an end in and of itself.
Yep.
And that's really what we're having. Sex isn't about being closer to your spouse and making children, which also brings you closer to your spouse. Instead, sex is just about your own personal gratification, and it's nothing else.
It's your cummies. That's what it's about. It's your cummies.
And so, again, having money isn't about, having a legacy and being able to help your neighbors by providing opportunities for them and by investing in your community and building it up. And again, having a legacy for your children. And having money is so that way you can just spend it on whatever it is that you want. You can have the biggest, nicest house. You can fill it up with whatever kind of stuff that you want. It's all about, you. And so, or it's just about the once you get to a certain point, it's just about seeing that number in your bank account get higher and higher and higher, seeing your net worth grow and grow and grow. So it's not even about spending the money at that point. It's just about having it for some people.
It's just, they want that high score mentality,
Yeah. Again, you can apply it to anything. That would be some of the main things. And that's most people's main things, right? Is sex and greed. That's where most people have most of their issues.
Yeah.
The internet, right? Entertainment. If you recognize what is the purpose of entertainment, and so you're using it towards that purpose, it's fine. I think for a lot of people, entertainment has become an end in and of itself. It's become the default for people. When I'm going to go home and rest, well, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to watch TV, or I'm going to, play a game or something. And so it's not a means toward an end. It's an end in and of himself. It's through, that is what makes them move and live and breathe, essentially. And that's where it becomes, in any of these instances, idolatry, and then it ultimately becomes destructive, because these things were never meant to be ends in and of themselves.
Yeah.
They were always meant to be a means toward an end.
Yep.
But
Well, Luke, I think we're going to end it here soon. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Pastor Tom? Or did you have any other things to add on when it comes to the decline of the West or Christianity in the West? I mean, we basically covered Gnosticism, we covered materialism, we covered the counting of numbers. The numbers count more. We talked about people who are just don't want to lead the church, what have you. What else do you have to add? Anything
Well,
else?
I guess it's just to have it to kind of end on a good note. If you care about the church growing and succeeding, the best way to do that is by just following Christ and preaching Christ crucified for the forgiveness of sins, and then living that out in your life. So if you actually believe that, you actually believe who Jesus is and what he did, then you'll want to read more about him, so you'll want to read your Bibles more. You'll want to understand what it says, and you'll want to, follow your king. And so that, by Christians just being Christian, that will create a culture to where better pastors will arise from that, better leaders will arise from that, better families will arise from that. So, the best thing that we could do, I think, going forward, is to just be Christian and what that means. If you don't know what that means, then find out, look up, again, read the scriptures, find confessions of faith. What do Christians actually believe? How should we actually, what does the Christian actually look like? These things, there are clear answers to these questions. And not to say that every detail of your life is worked out, but there is a general pattern of what you can define someone, say that person is a Christian or that person is not a Christian. And so whatever that pattern is, be that, by God's power, by God's grace, in the Spirit, in Christ, to the glory of God, not for your own salvation, but because God has saved you, be that. And then that will produce, like I said, better families, a better culture upon which you'll have better pastors and better leaders that will make an overall effect, through time, an overall better world, but it'll take a long time. And the other thing to recognize is that you're going to do this not so much for yourself, but for your children. Like civilization as we've known it in the past, the prosperity that we've known in the past, that's probably done. We probably won't see that again in our lifetime. But we can create a culture that for our children and our grandchildren, they maybe could see, a similar type of prosperity, a similar type of stable culture. So we're going to have to plant and cultivate trees whose shade we'll never sit in.
Yep, and it's an article of faith that it'll actually ever will. But the future belongs to those who show up.
Yeah.
Luke, any final thoughts?
I just wanted to go full circle, if I can put it up here.
Right on.
Whereas what Luther says, then what we've been hearing and what we just heard from your message is that the power of the Holy Ghost is mediated in and through the Word. Amen. When are we going to believe that? That's what I say, it's a strategy of unbelief. The minister wants to grow his church. The minister wants to see success. And so he's looking for all these programs, all these techniques to get people to come in, but he never goes over the bridge and gets to the Word. If you want a power in your church, be an expository preacher. Preach the Word.
Yep.
Because that's where the Spirit is. Isn't that God's strategy?
Yes.
And if we believe God's strategy, we're going to preach the
Amen.
Word.
Amen.
Yep.
In season.
And I'm preaching now.
Yeah. Right
I
on.
miss RC.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, be good to one another, take care of one another. Remember, saving the West is a side quest.